There is no man poor who can command the minds of others with precision. There is no man truly rich who lacks the ability to direct thought, language, and emotional tone with calm mastery. And there is no man powerful who has not trained his tongue to serve the laws of his mind, rather than the chaos of his moods. The spoken word is more than sound. It is signal, it is currency, it is leverage. And when used properly, when sculpted with the chisel of discipline and delivered with the force of clarity, it becomes one of the greatest wealth-building tools in the world. Let me tell you now, without exaggeration, a single sentence can open more doors than 10 years of labor. But that sentence must be forged from precision, not from noise, not from need, not from reactivity or desperation. It must be born from a mind that has trained itself to speak only when words serve purpose. That is the first principle of wealth through communication. Speech is not for expression, speech is for construction. The average man speaks to relieve pressure, to be heard, to be liked, to be validated. And in doing so, he squanders his power. He becomes predictable. He becomes emotional. He becomes weak, not in volume, but in structure. But the man who speaks with intention, who restrains, who calculates, who pauses before releasing his thoughts into the world, this man begins to build. He builds alliances. He builds perception. He builds influence. He builds trust. And over time, that trust compounds into wealth not only financial, but spiritual, relational, and social. And this skill, this habit of high-level communication is not natural. It is trained, built, forged through hours of silence, pages of writing, and a relentless refusal to allow emotion to contaminate meaning. Now let me speak directly to your inner genius, the part of you that is tired of wasting energy in small talk, of watching weaker minds dominate through noise, of knowing you are capable of deeper command, but lacking the system to develop it. That system begins here. And the foundation of that system is this law. He who cannot govern his words cannot govern his life. Because words are thoughts crystallized. And if your thoughts are scattered, your speech will betray you. If your emotions govern your words, then your life will reflect that volatility. But if your speech flows from structure, if your communication is calm, precise, restrained, intentional, then even your silence will gain value. This is why emotional detachment is not optional. It is essential. You must train yourself first to detach from the impulse to speak. Do not allow yourself the luxury of spontaneous expression when you are charged, triggered, or uncertain. Do not mistake catharsis for communication. Do not confuse release with leadership. Your goal is not to feel better. Your goal is to become a vessel of exact meaning. Let me make it clearer. You are not here to be understood. You are here to be unmissable. The man who communicates wealth is not loud. He is not always seen. But when he speaks, his words carry so much weight because they are rare, because they are clean, because they are final. That is what we begin to train now. And the first communication habit that separates the wealthy from the wandering is this. Habitant, say less, mean more. The average man speaks out of need. The exceptional man speaks out of certainty. He speaks when it is time to shape reality, not when he's seeking comfort. To say less is not to withdraw. It is to heighten. It is to increase the power of your words through scarcity, through compression, through intention. A well-trained mind uses fewer words because it chooses them more carefully, and because it speaks from a high place within, not from reaction, but from rhythm, not from confusion, but from command. Begin this habit immediately. Before you speak, ask yourself, does this build something, or is it simply noise? If it builds, speak. Build with courage. If it serves only to relieve, to react, to fill space, remain silent. Let others exhaust themselves with filler. Because silence, when owned, is not absence. It is leverage. Habit 2. Never explain, only clarify. There is a myth among those who have not yet mastered themselves, a myth that says you must justify your thoughts to be respected. That myth is false. That myth is poor. That myth belongs to men who have not yet found their internal law. Explanation is emotional. It is defensive. It reeks of needing to be liked, to be understood, to be seen. But the man who commands success does not explain. He clarifies. Clarification is strength. It is surgical. It removes confusion without losing dignity. It asserts without arguing. You must learn to make your position known not as an invitation to discussion, but as an offering of structure. I understand your position. Mine is this. No apology, no begging, no desperation for approval. Your words do not require permission. They require alignment with purpose. Build this habit by eliminating over-talking. Do not say more than what is needed. The more you speak, the more ground you give. The more you clarify, the more you control. Habit 3. Ask precise questions that direct energy. The weak communicator answers everything. He reacts, he defends, he elaborates endlessly, hoping to win favor through explanation. But the rich communicator asks. He inquires. He directs. He guides the flow of energy through the power of precision. Can you be more specific? What result are we aiming for? How does this relate to the objective? With each question, he gathers power not because he demands control, but because he establishes the frame. He does not walk into conversations hoping to be liked. He enters to structure thought. And because most people live in mental fog, they are drawn to the one who thinks in straight lines. Develop this habit by writing your questions before you enter important conversations. Script your precision in advance, then watch how easily the room begins to orbit around your structure. Be cat. Let emotion rise, but never ride it. You will be tempted. You will be insulted. You will be misunderstood. You will be provoked. And in that moment, your mind will reach for the easy out expression. But expression is not leadership. Reaction is not clarity. Train yourself to feel without obeying. Pause. Watch the emotion. Pass like a train. Do not get on. Observe it. Thank it. Then return to the moment with clean thought. Emotion is a wave. If you attach your words to it, your meaning will crash with it. But if you let it pass and speak after the calm has returned, your words will cut like truth. And truth is more powerful than all the noise in the world. Habit 5. Speak to intent, not to ego. Most men communicate to win, to dominate, to prove they are right. But the man who communicates from ego is always at war. Every conversation becomes a battlefield. Every disagreement becomes a personal wound. Every misunderstanding becomes a crisis. He is fragile, though he shouts. He is lost, though he speaks often, because ego is brittle, and words driven by ego are sharp but hollow. But the rich communicator sees through this illusion. He speaks not to be superior, but to bring structure to the moment. He does not react to the ego of others because he has mastered his own. He asks himself in silence, what is the true purpose of this interaction? Not, how can I prove myself right? Not, how can I protect my pride? But, how can I direct this moment toward purpose? This habit is rare, but it is powerful. It allows you to rise above conflict while still holding your line. It allows you to de-escalate drama without shrinking your presence. It allows you to assert boundaries with strength, not with noise. You must practice this every day, especially when you are challenged, especially when your instinct is to defend, because the man who detaches from ego but stays anchored to intent becomes untouchable. Ego is reactive. Intent is decisive. Ego scatters. Intent builds. Choose to speak from intent, and your voice will carry the weight of discipline, not emotion. Habit 6. Slow down when the room speeds up. There is a pressure that builds in human interaction, the desire to match the energy around you. People rush, they interrupt, they inflate their tone to dominate the air. And if you are untrained, you will match them. You will become a reflection of their chaos, and in doing so, you will abandon your center. But the rich communicator is not ruled by rhythm. He creates it. The faster others speak, the more calmly he replies. The more emotionally others react, the more steadily he responds. And because of that contrast, because of that stillness, he becomes the reference point, the center of gravity, the one others begin to follow without even knowing why. The untrained mind feels pressure and speeds up. The trained mind feels pressure and slows down. This habit must be rehearsed in small moments. When someone interrupts you, pause. When someone escalates, lower your tone. When the energy rises, become the anchor. And eventually, your communication will carry a frequency so grounded that chaos cannot penetrate it. Habit 7. Make your language visual. Words alone are not enough. The world is filled with talkers, men who speak in abstractions, theories, and generalities, but few men can make their words felt. The rich communicator does not speak merely to be understood. He speaks to be seen. His words form pictures. His thoughts are not vague, they are concrete. He uses metaphor, analogy, story. He anchors his message in the mind of the listener with clarity so vivid that it becomes unforgettable. He does not say, "We need to focus more." He says, "Right now, we are walking into battle with our eyes closed. If we don't adjust, we'll lose before we even know where we are." He does not say, "We're falling behind." He says, "We are bleeding time like a wound, and if we don't close it, we'll collapse." This is language that lives, and people follow what they can see, not what they can merely process. To build this habit, study great communicators, memorize phrases that spark emotion, practice translating your thoughts into image, not just sound, because wealth follows clarity, and clarity follows visual language. Habit 8. End conversations clean. The way a conversation ends determines how long it echoes. The average communicator lingers. He overexplains. He softens clarity into compromise. He fears silence, so he fills it with repetition. And in doing so, he weakens the entire message. But the rich communicator ends with decisiveness. He states the final thought. Then he stops. He does not wait to be rescued by approval. He does not dilute his message by rephrasing it 3 different ways. He does not speak to fill silence. He lets the silence close the door behind his words. You must learn to finish with strength. One clear sentence, one simple statement. Let it land, let it breathe, and walk away. The man who ends clearly will be remembered. The man who explains endlessly will be forgotten. Train this by writing your final sentence before meetings, before negotiations, before critical conversations. Know how you will end, and when you reach it, say it, then stop. That's how you install structure into the minds of others. Habit 9. Listen to words, but tune to frequency. Most people hear what others say, but the rich communicator hears how they say it. He does not just absorb content, he scans tone, pacing, energy. He listens for patterns, conflict avoidance, neediness, certainty, bluffing, overcompensation. And from that data, he calculates truth. This is not manipulation, this is awareness. It is the ability to perceive what the unspoken words reveal. Because people lie, but tone does not. People posture, but rhythm exposes. People pretend, but frequency tells the truth. You must train this habit by listening with your entire nervous system. Listen not only to their words, but to your internal signal. Your body knows before your brain does. When someone speaks from fear, feel the contraction in your chest. When someone masks uncertainty with volume, feel the tremor beneath their voice. When someone flatters you excessively, feel the imbalance in energy. Trust it, because the man who can read frequency while speaking clearly becomes the most powerful person in any room. Habit 10. Communicate from identity, not emotion. This is the final habit, the crown, the code that separates the master from the mimic. The average man communicates based on how he feels, but the wealthy man communicates based on who he is. There is a difference between saying, "I'm angry, so I'll lash out," and saying, "I am disciplined, so I will speak from structure even when angry." The first is reaction. The second is law. This is where emotional detachment becomes divine, because you no longer speak as a reflection of your inner chaos. You speak as a reflection of your inner alignment. You do not adjust your tone for approval. You do not inflate your volume to feel powerful. You do not compromise your boundaries to avoid discomfort. You speak from code, from character, from clarity. And when that level of alignment is repeated daily through voice, through posture, through silence, you become wealth. You become the walking embodiment of a message so rare, so resonant, that people will pay anything just to be near it. Not because of your words, but because of the law behind them. When you speak from identity and not emotion, you do not speak as a man adjusting to the world. You speak as a man adjusting the world to himself. And that is what communication is truly about. Not noise, not negotiation, not the desperate dance for approval, but calibration, alignment, signal, frequency. Because the words you speak shape the room, the tone you use defines the rhythm, the stillness you carry rewrites the tempo of the interaction. And eventually, you realize something undeniable. You are no longer speaking for others to understand you. You are speaking to remind yourself of who you are. That is when wealth becomes automatic. That is when influence becomes quiet. That is when leadership becomes presence, not performance. Because the final stage of communication is not expression, it is transmission. You speak from such alignment that people feel your standard before they comprehend your sentence. You no longer convince, say. You no longer chase agreement. You no longer soften truth to make others comfortable. You speak with the tone of a man who knows his law and who has repeated his identity so consistently that his nervous system now speaks louder than his vocabulary. This is the rare frequency. This is the energy that causes rooms to fall silent, not because of intimidation, but because your voice is clear and theirs is not, because your thoughts are structured and theirs are scattered, because your rhythm is internal and theirs is reactive. You must now live here. You must now walk into every conversation, not with hope, not with strategy, but with law already installed. You speak when it builds. You pause when it sharpens. You wait when it tests. You clarify when it matters. You withdraw when it turns to noise. You lead, not because you asked to, but because the absence of your clarity would let the room collapse. That is what power through communication truly is. Not dominance, resonance, not volume, vibration, not persuasion, presence. And that presence is earned. It is the compound interest of your discipline. Every time you chose not to react, every time you practiced restraint, every time you traded emotional release for structural clarity, every time you rewrote your vocabulary to match your vision, every time you spoke from identity, not insecurity, you were building this. This presence, this law, this standard that makes people sit up when you walk in, not because of what you say, but because of what you refuse to say. And now, you are no longer allowed to lower that standard. You are no longer permitted to speak just to be heard. You are no longer permitted to argue with those who speak from confusion. You are no longer permitted to weaken your tone to accommodate chaos. You have crossed into the realm of the rare. And with that comes responsibility not to others, but to your own structure. Because the world will try to pull you back into noise. It will provoke, it will bait, it will gossip, it will pressure, it will seduce you with the comfort of careless speech. But you must remember, every careless word is an invitation to weakness. Every reactive sentence is a betrayal of your new self. Every emotionally driven argument is a door back to the man you buried. And you did not build this new language to visit the past. You built it to create the future. The future where every conversation is an asset, where every silence is a boundary, where every word you speak becomes currency not spent on approval, but invested in alignment, where you no longer participate in anything that drags your energy below your standard. You do not explain your values. You do not debate your truth. You do not tolerate noise disguised as dialogue. You speak with rhythm, with reason, with restraint, because power, true power, is not about saying more. It's about meaning more. And meaning more comes only when your speech is backed by thought, and your thought is governed by law. Your law. So let this now be written deep into the system of your being. I do not speak to be understood. I speak from understanding. I do not perform language. I direct energy. I do not chase agreement. I deliver structure. I do not win arguments. I install frequency. I do not dilute my words. I sharpen them. I do not communicate as a beggar of connection. I speak as a builder of reality. And if the world does not hear me, I remain still because truth does not shout, it echoes. This is who you are now. Not because you claimed it once, but because you repeat it daily. because you rehearse it in silence, because you install it with every word you do not say. And now the time of becoming is over. You are. You are the frequency. You are the law. You are the one who no longer waits to be listened to. You are the one they listen to, even in silence. There comes a moment rare and irreversible when a man no longer speaks like the world taught him to speak. He no longer bends his tone to be liked, no longer adjusts his truth to be welcomed, no longer rehearses weakness in the form of emotional leakage. He speaks like a system. He speaks like a signal. He speaks like the mind of wealth shaped into sound. And the moment you reach that level, when your words no longer ask for permission, when your tone no longer flinches, when your presence no longer seeks agreement, you enter a different league of life. You no longer communicate. You command. And not with noise, not with dominance, not with the desperation of volume. You command with your standard. You command with your law. You command with your pause, your calm, your clarity, your refusal to be rushed. And that command does something remarkable. It transforms every interaction into leverage. It turns every conversation into strategy. It turns every sentence into architecture. And it turns you not into a talker, not into a performer, but into a builder of unseen structures. Because language is a building material. And now, every word you use is a brick. Every pause is mortar. Every sentence is scaffolding for the world you are constructing, and that world does not need everyone to understand it. It needs you to keep building it, brick by brick, habit by habit, standard by standard, so that the man who once reacted, once explained, once begged to be heard, is never again mistaken for the man who speaks now. You speak now from discipline. You speak now from thought made sharp by silence. You speak now from emotional detachment, not because you are cold, but because you are clean. And from that clarity flows wealth of all kinds. Wealth in relationships, wealth in partnerships, wealth in reputation, wealth in stillness, wealth in the knowing that even in silence, your message remains. Because you are no longer using language. You have become it. You have become the vibration that others feel when the room tenses and looks to you. You have become the tone that others repeat when making decisions. You have become the sentence that echoes in the mind long after the conversation ends. And now, everything that once pulled you into chaos, those emotional traps, those spiraling arguments, those moments of weakness where you tried to explain yourself to people who had no structure of their own, those moments are over. You do not return to that frequency. You do not revisit the man who needed to be understood. Because now you are the man who is felt, the man who says few words but leaves 100 thoughts behind, the man whose tone carries more than a speech, the man whose communication is no longer about being right but about being aligned, the man who leads not because he wants power, but because the absence of his standard would cost the world too much. You are that man now. You built him, in silence, through repetition, through structure, through daily disciplined rejection of the old way of speaking. You traded noise for gravity. You traded speed for stillness. You traded reaction for law. And now your words, scarce, deliberate, exact, are richer than gold. Because they are not words. They are decisions made audible. So from this moment forward, speak only when your words build. Speak only when your voice aligns with the man you've become. Speak only when your law requires it, not your emotion, not your fear, not your habit. And when you do, speak like the one they'll never forget. Not because you tried to impress them, but because your voice carried the weight of a man who mastered his mind and let his habits do the talking. Now go, say less, mean more, and build your legacy with every word. Because there is no final word when the speaker is law. There is only deepening, only further mastery, more silence between the lines, more gravity behind the voice. You do not end when the message is delivered. You begin again as the embodiment of that message. Each day becomes a demonstration, not of who you are trying to be, but of who you refuse to stop being. And communication, for you, is no longer a tool. It is a code of conduct. It is the visible layer of an invisible vow. You do not just speak with strength. You breathe with restraint. You walk with precision. You respond with rhythm. You act with the weight of decisions made long before the world asked you to. You don't talk about your values anymore. You are the value in the room. You are the atmosphere shift. You are the recalibration. You are the sound of boundaries without having to speak their names. And when others stumble over justifications and stammering explanations, you remain still, not because you have nothing to say, but because you've already said enough through the structure of your being. This is what happens when communication transcends dialogue. It becomes identity broadcast. And once your identity is broadcast at the frequency of discipline, you no longer convince people to trust you. They feel that they must. Not because you demand it, but because their nervous system recognizes that your words cost something, because your silence costs something, because your restraint costs something. And now, everything about you carries value because you no longer speak from convenience. You speak only when the inner signal has passed the test of law, alignment, and consequence. And that speech becomes treasure. Because everyone else is broke with words, rich in noise, poor in substance. They speak because they fear the pause. They speak because they crave belonging. They speak because silence terrifies those who don't know what they stand for. But you rest inside your pause. You lead through your restraint. You let silence build the pressure. And when the pressure peaks, you deliver one sentence that shifts the entire trajectory of the room. That is how wealth moves. That is how power listens. That is how legacy installs itself in the minds of others, not through force, but through inevitability. So, if you must speak, speak as though every word costs you something sacred, because it does. It costs you your alignment. It costs you your standard. It costs you the rhythm you spent years building. And no man who has built that rhythm trades it for approval. No man who has built that rhythm wastes it on emotional reflex. No man who has built that rhythm lowers his volume just to be allowed to remain in a room he should already own. So rise again. Rise without performance. Rise without announcement. Rise with your language refined, your message distilled, your vibration unshaken by anyone who still uses volume to imitate vision. And speak again, not to conclude, not to convince, but because the time has come again to remind the world you are still the law. You've crossed the threshold where communication is no longer about expression. It is about transmission, sending the weight of your internal standard across time through silence into the structure of everything around you. Every word you speak from here is either a continuation of your law or a return to the old man. There is no middle ground. You must now protect your language with the same intensity that a soldier protects his post. Because the minute you let emotion, doubt, or the craving for approval write your sentences for you, you weaken the entire structure. You lose compound power. You dilute the frequency. You sacrifice sovereignty. And in this realm, sovereignty is not optional. It is the prerequisite for wealth. Because make no mistake, communication is your economy now. It is your primary currency. Not because it buys you things in the world, but because it builds the bridges upon which your ideas must travel, because it builds the trust that money depends on, because it creates the clarity that others collapse without, because it removes all friction between who you are and what the world must experience when they encounter you. Your communication is your contract with reality. And so from this point forward, you are no longer speaking casually. You are no longer thinking out loud. You are no longer rehearsing weakness under the disguise of openness. You are deliberate, measured, exact, because you understand this law. Words are not decorations. They are decisions. They are architecture. And every sentence is either a blueprint for your kingdom or the hammer that tears it down. This is why you rehearse, not to impress, to align, to remember the rhythm of who you are when the world tries to convince you otherwise. And now, because you live from this alignment, you no longer speak to fill the air, argue to prove your worth, flatter to gain access, over-explain to avoid discomfort, mimic other men to sound confident. You walk into rooms already carrying what others are trying to find. You stand in silence and the untrained get nervous because they're waiting for you to perform. But you don't, because your power is not in expression. It's in containment. It's in pressure. It's in the fact that your words, when spoken, already carry the weight of 1,000 that were never wasted. And so you become rare, not because of what you say, but because of what you no longer need to say. And in a world obsessed with talking, you become sacred through your restraint. And make no mistake, people will begin to mirror you. They will lower their voice. They will pause before speaking. They will watch your eyes when you speak. They will wonder why you make them feel so exposed with so few words. It is not magic. It is mastery. And it was built in the shadows where you trained yourself to say less, mean more, and carry your message in your silence. Let this now be your baseline. Do not fall beneath it again. Because every time you choose restraint over reaction, every time you build clarity instead of chasing agreement, every time you speak from law instead of feeling, you increase your value in every room you enter. This is the path. This is the standard. This is the life of the one who communicates like wealth itself. And once you live here, you never go back. The richest man in the room does not speak the most. He speaks the least because his life already speaks for him. You will find, if you study men of true power, not the performers, not the pretenders, but the builders of dynasties, they all carry the same signal. Wait. Wait in their gaze. Wait in their posture. Wait in their pauses. Wait in the silence between syllables. That wait is not ego. It is density of alignment. It's not arrogance. It's economy of energy. It is the evidence of a man who does not waste himself. A man who does not spill words like loose change. A man who has trained himself breath by breath not to speak until his message has matured in the furnace of internal law. You can fake charisma. You can fake performance. But you cannot fake calm intensity. That kind of calm, the kind that turns heads without trying, only comes when a man has silenced every childish part of himself that once needed to be heard, validated, and agreed with. That calm is a communication weapon, one of the most powerful forms of influence on earth. Because it is not noise that controls a room. It is stillness. Not emotional reactivity, but restraint under pressure. Not faster speech, but longer pause. When you pause, the room leans in. When you breathe, others forget to. When you lower your tone, it cuts deeper than shouting ever could. And this control of time itself through communication is the final edge. The realm of kings, the language of power that wealth responds to without being told. Because let me be clear, money listens to tone. Money flows toward clarity. Money avoids emotional noise. Money trusts calmness, conviction, and calibration. If your voice shakes when asking for the price you deserve, if your face twitches when defending your vision, if your sentence meanders when defining your value, then wealth senses instability, and it leaves. But if your tone is law, if your silence is anchored, if your words are minimal and exact, then wealth recognizes you as structure. It respects your voice as a container that can hold greater responsibility. And responsibility, in the realm of commerce and legacy, is always rewarded. So from this moment forward, train your silence as ruthlessly as you train your sentences. Let your eye contact finish what your words start. Let your gestures speak only when your presence invites them. Let every word come through internal gates. Is this aligned? Is this law? Is this clean of emotional leakage? Will this build? If the answer is no, you say nothing. Because silence that protects your power is worth more than a sentence that spills it. And over time, that silence becomes signal. You walk into a room and others feel the edge. They don't know why they defer to you. They don't know why they trust you. They don't know why they follow you. It is because your voice is no longer about sound. It is about stability. You become the man who speaks the language of certainty in an uncertain world. The man who communicates in weight and not in words. The man whose message is not a performance, but a frequency honed in solitude and deployed with surgical precision. This is how power speaks. This is how wealth listens. This is how legacies are built not with more noise, but with more gravity. And now, you carry that gravity because you earned it, because you burned for it, because you buried the undisciplined speaker inside you and emerged as the architect of identity through communication. So speak only when your silence has become so powerful. It demands to be made audible. That is where we now stand. True wealth does not respond to desperation. True power does not respond to noise. True legacy does not respond to performance. They respond to vibration. They respond to the feeling beneath your language. And that feeling is built through discipline of self. If you have not mastered your emotions, if you have not governed your impulses, if you have not rewritten your inner dialogue, then your communication is already contaminated. Because every sentence you speak carries the residue of who you are. Your insecurity shows up in your tone. Your desperation leaks through your speed. Your self-doubt reveals itself in your over-explaining. But when you are aligned, when you have walked through fire and did not flinch, when you have held your tongue in moments of emotional chaos, when you have trained yourself to speak only when what you say builds the world you came to create, then your voice becomes pure. It becomes rare air. It becomes the sound of a man who has nothing to prove, because his existence already proves it. And at that point, you are no longer speaking to get reactions. You are speaking to give revelation. You are no longer trying to convince. You are inviting alignment. You are no longer chasing rapport. You are establishing order. Because your communication is now a weapon of stabilization. You bring rhythm where there is chaos. You bring boundaries where there is erosion. You bring consciousness where there is emotional sleep. And that, more than any strategy, any marketing, any manipulation, is what makes you richer than 99% of people. Because the richest men in the world are not just financially rich. They are energetically sovereign. They speak with ownership. They negotiate with calm detachment. They walk away when the frequency is wrong. They do not chase. They do not explain. They do not dilute. They command rooms through the congruence of their energy and their words. And this is the mastery you are stepping into, where every message you deliver is not just information. It is alignment made visible. It is discipline made audible. It is wealth consciousness speaking through human form. So practice this. The next time you enter a room, speak nothing until your nervous system is calm. Wait until you are in control of your breath, your gaze, your rhythm. Then, when you speak, do so from stillness. Let the space between your words do half the work. Let your tone move slower than the listener expects. Let your pauses signal that your value is not rushed. Let your language sharpen the edge of your standards. And above all, speak only when you are carrying the weight of responsibility behind your words. Because the world has enough voices. It is starving for standard. And when your voice becomes a standard, not an echo, not a performance, not a reaction, but a law, you no longer communicate to survive. You communicate to sculpt reality. And from there, you don't just become richer. You become unshakable, unmistakable, unforgettable. You become the one who speaks as if the future is already listening. And it is. In a world flooded with opinions, the man who speaks with principle becomes a rarity. And when that principle is fused with discipline, it forms something sacred, irrefutable presence. You don't negotiate with it. You don't argue with it. You don't override it. You feel it. And here is the unspoken truth most never learn. The world does not respect what you say. It respects what you're willing to say without needing agreement. It respects what you say without emotional tremble. It respects what you say when silence would have been safer. It respects what you say only when you say it from law, not reaction, not performance, not desperation. This is why emotional detachment is not coldness, it is command. It is mental heat shield. It is the necessary filtration layer between your inner kingdom and the chaos of the world. If you speak from raw emotion, your enemies own you. If you speak from validation seeking, your audience owns you. But if you speak from anchored clarity, from the unshaken laws of your own constitution, you own the room. Because now your voice is not attached to ego. It's not tied to approval. It's not threatened by challenge. It is forged in principle and executed in silence first. And in that rare state, something changes. People stop interrupting you. They stop testing you. They stop trying to decode you because they realize you cannot be moved, baited, or cracked. And this is the beginning of energetic wealth, the kind that precedes all visible forms of it. The wealth of being unshakable in conversation. The wealth of not having to rush your words. The wealth of trusting your own silence. The wealth of being respected without needing to be liked. And this is the frequency that money responds to. Because wealth is not attracted to chaos. It is attracted to clarity, to containment, to certainty. So from this moment forward, every time you speak, you are not just expressing, you are placing a signature on your identity. Every word, a vote, every tone, a statement, every silence, a signal of how much power you hold inside. Do not let your sentences betray your power. Do not let your tone contradict your sovereignty. Do not let your mouth be louder than your presence. Because in the upper 1% of wealth and influence, the ones who thrive are not those who talk the most. They are those who have learned to speak with surgical self-control. They are those who speak only when their words can alter the momentum of a moment. They are those who understand this law. If your communication is not building leverage, it is draining it. And the man who builds with every sentence, he does not compete. He constructs. So go forward now. Let every message you send, every call you take, every answer you give be spoken through the mouth of the man you are becoming. The one who needs no validation. The one who speaks only when it aligns with his standard. The one who makes wealth inevitable because his communication makes weakness impossible. There is a moment in every powerful man's life when he stops trying to sound smart and starts speaking like he means it. He no longer performs intelligence. He embodies clarity. He no longer speaks to impress. He speaks to direct energy. And when he does, the world shifts not because of what he says, but because of what he doesn't have to explain anymore. The highest form of communication is not persuasion. It is alignment. And alignment is silent before it ever becomes verbal. This is why your habits must precede your message. If you want to speak with wealth, you must live with structure. If you want to influence others, you must first dominate yourself. If you want your voice to ring with authority, you must earn that tone through daily obedience to your highest standard. Because here's the truth that few can stomach. No one truly listens to your words. They listen to your life. If your voice contradicts your walk, if your promises collapse under pressure, if your wisdom comes from books you've never lived, then you become just another speaker, another motivator, another sound that fades. But if your communication is born from practice, sharpened in silence, forged in solitude, and tested in fire, then every word you speak becomes an imprint on the nervous system of the listener. Because people are not just hearing you, they are feeling your calibration. They are registering your self-control. They are measuring the distance between your mouth and your actions. And in that distance, they decide trust or tune out. So make the decision now to close that gap, to speak only what you have embodied, to express only what you've proven in private, to communicate not from the shallow well of memorized quotes, but from the deep reservoir of a man who has lived the law, bled the standard, and returned with truth engraved in his breath. This is the level you are called to. This is the room you now stand in. And here, the price of entry is not charisma. It is congruence. Speak like a man who carries that cost daily. And know this, when you speak like that, not often, but with weight, not loudly, but with command, not desperately, but with finality, you don't just sound powerful. You become inevitable. You become the voice that shapes outcomes, the presence that recalibrates chaos, the anchor that others grab when they've lost their own footing. And what follows is what always follows power, respect, resources, responsibility. Because the world is starving for men who speak from alignment, not opinion, not noise, not feeling, law. You are now one of those men. Live accordingly. not to end the message, but to seal it, to forge it, to burn it so deeply into the bedrock of your identity that from this moment on, your voice becomes a tool of divine precision. This is not about communication anymore. It is about transmission. You no longer speak from memory. You speak from law. You speak from burned bridges and rebuilt selves. You speak from the quiet violence of a man who has already died to who he was, and come back speaking like fire carved into stone. So listen closely. Your words are not just tools. They are commands. They are blueprints you hand to your subconscious. They are prayers the universe responds to with action. Every word you speak tells your brain what to seek. Every sentence you form lays a track your behavior follows. Every conversation you lead either builds momentum or erodes credibility. So ask yourself daily, does the way I speak mirror the man I swore I would become? Do your words waste energy? Do they compromise clarity? Do they leak doubt when pressure rises? Or do they declare your presence even in silence? The man who rewires his communication to match his calling does not live like others. He does not argue to win. He does not explain to be understood. He does not rehearse weakness in the name of honesty. And he speaks to cut away noise, not to create more of it. He speaks to lead, not to blend in. He speaks to protect his frequency, not to dilute it. And this discipline of language, tone, energy, and intent becomes his superpower, because while others are still learning to talk better, he has become a frequency that cannot be ignored. When he speaks, leaders listen. When he pauses, tension builds. When he finishes, decisions get made. And do you know why? Because his voice is clean, not fancy, not rehearsed, not theatrical, clean. Clean of emotional clutter, clean of weak framing, clean of false humility, clean of neediness, clean of contradiction between what he says and who he is. And when a man's voice is clean, when his breath carries the same weight as his reputation, when his communication becomes an extension of his inner order, he does not seek wealth. He attracts it. He does not ask for influence. He radiates it. He does not beg for trust. He becomes the standard people calibrate themselves against. And so I leave you here, not with inspiration, but with a mirror. Look into it. Ask not, what should I say? Ask instead, what must I become so that my words carry weight without volume? What must I master so that silence becomes my signature? What must I build so that when I speak, the world recognizes law in human form? Because the men who build empires, who command millions with few syllables, who shift nations, companies, families, and destinies with a sentence, they are not loud. They are lived. And now, so are you. Your voice is no longer yours. It is a weapon, a tool, a legacy. Use it with the gravity of one who understands the cost of misalignment and the reward of perfect congruence. You are now the message. Act accordingly, speak accordingly, build accordingly, and never again explain yourself. The world already heard you. You've become the frequency. Now go live it.